I found the plan on a woodworking blog. Clean layout, good photos, free download. I printed it out Saturday morning, stacked my lumber against the garage wall, and got started. By early afternoon, I had a problem I couldn't explain. The side panels were cut exactly to the dimensions on the plan. The diagram looked right, but when I dry fit the frame, there was a gap on one corner that shouldn't exist, about 3/16 of an inch. Not massive, but enough that the joint wouldn't close cleanly, and I'd already made 8 identical cuts. That moment, standing over a pile of boards that were technically correct and somehow still wrong, is one that a lot of woodworkers know. And here's the question I should have asked myself then, but didn't for years. What if the plan was the problem? And not me. Most woodworkers in that situation assume they measured wrong, or that their saw is slightly off, or that they're just not experienced enough yet to catch whatever they're missing. I made that assumption for a long time, and it kept me from finishing more projects than I'd like to count. Here's what I've come to understand after working through dozens of plan sources over the years. The woodworking plan industry has a structural problem that nobody talks about openly. The vast majority of plans available online, free downloads, blog posts, Pinterest diagrams, even many paid collections, were designed at a desk. Someone drew them, cleaned them up, and published them. And the critical step that separates a usable plan from a frustrating one was skipped entirely. Nobody built it first. That's the problem. Not your skill, not your tools. The plan was designed on paper and released into the world without anyone ever testing whether it actually worked on a real workbench with real lumber from a real store. I call it the draft plan problem. And once you understand it, you start seeing it everywhere. In the measurements that are technically correct, but based on nominal lumber dimensions instead of actual milled sizes. In the steps that jump from cutting to assembly without explaining how to square the frame, in the materials lists that are always just slightly off. I've built from enough of these plans to recognize the pattern, and I've built from enough tested ones to know the difference is not subtle. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Because the draft plan problem doesn't always show up the same way. It has 3 faces, and chances are you've met at least one of them. The first one is what I call the invisible error. You're building a shaker-style end table from a plan you found on a popular woodworking site. The plan looks thorough. Exploded diagram, numbered steps, a cut list. You follow it carefully. Everything feels right until you go to cut the tenons on the apron pieces, and the dimensions in the diagram don't match the dimensions in the cut list. Width where the thickness should be. It's a small thing on paper. In your shop, it means the joint won't close. You cut based on the diagram because it looked more reliable. $60 of oak. Wrong cut. And the worst part? You spend the next hour wondering if you misread the plan because the error is subtle enough that you genuinely can't tell whether it's the plan or you. You tell yourself you'll be more careful next time. But careful wasn't the issue. And this is where most people make a mistake that costs them months. They slow down, double-check everything, work more cautiously. But the plan is still wrong. Careful doesn't fix a plan that was never tested. The second phase is the missing step. You're building a storage bench from a free download. Good photos of the finished piece, reasonable materials list, clean step numbering. You get through step 6 without any problems. Step 7 tells you to attach the face frame, but nobody told you how to square the carcass first. If you've been building long enough, you know to do it anyway. But if you're intermediate, which is most people, you attach the face frame to a carcass that's 2 degrees out of square, and you don't realize it until the lid doesn't sit flush and the drawer gaps are uneven. The bench looks fine from 3 feet away. Up close, something's always just a little off. You finish it. You put it in the corner. You tell yourself the next one will be better. But the next free plan has a different missing step in a different place, and the result is the same. What nobody tells you about free woodworking plans is that the gaps aren't random. They cluster in the same places every time. Assembly order, squaring, hardware specs. Because those are the parts that are obvious to someone who builds every day and completely invisible to someone following written instructions for the first time. The third phase is the materials miscalculation. You find a plan for a chicken coop. Good size, good design, free. The materials list looks complete. You take it to the lumber yard and buy everything on the list. You get home, start cutting, and the frame pieces are coming up short. Not by much. About ½ an inch per board. The plan was written using nominal lumber dimensions, the size printed on the label at the store. But the actual milled dimension of a 2x4 is 1.5 inches by 3.5. The plan assumed 2x4. Your lumber measured 1.5 by 3.5. That ½ inch difference, multiplied across a dozen framing pieces, means your coop is smaller than the plan shows, and nothing fits the way the diagram says it should. You make it work. You adjust as you go. The coop gets built eventually, but it takes 2 extra weekends and 2 extra trips to the lumber yard. And here's what all 3 of these situations have in common. Not skill, not tools, not experience level. Every one of them traces back to the same root cause. The plan was designed by someone who never built it. The invisible error in the tenon dimensions, the missing squaring step, the nominal versus actual lumber confusion. These are exactly the mistakes that get caught and corrected when a plan is physically built in a workshop before it's published, and exactly the mistakes that slip through when it isn't. That's the draft plan problem, and it's not your fault. After enough of those experiences, I stopped asking what I was doing wrong and started asking a different question entirely. What would a plan look like if the person who wrote it had built it first, made the mistakes, found the gaps, corrected them, and only then written down the instructions? The answer is specific. The tenon dimensions would match the cut list because someone had already discovered the discrepancy at a workbench and fixed it before publishing. The squaring step would be in the instructions because the builder had felt the frame go out of square and knew to write it down. The materials list would be based on actual milled dimensions because whoever wrote it had stood at a lumber yard with real boards and real measurements. That's standard. Build it first, then publish it. Is what I eventually found in a plan library that works differently from everything I'd used before. The approach is straightforward. No plan gets released until it's been physically constructed in a real workshop. Every joint tested, every measurement verified against actual lumber. If a step is confusing in practice, it gets rewritten. If the materials list is off, it gets corrected. The mistakes get caught in their workshop, not yours. Going back to the 3 scenarios. The invisible tenon error gets caught at the bench and fixed before the plan ships. The missing squaring step gets added because the builder experienced the problem firsthand and wrote down the solution. The nominal versus actual lumber confusion gets corrected because whoever built the co-op bought the lumber from a real store and noticed the discrepancy. Each of those 3 problems, the ones that have been quietly ending your weekends, disappears when the plan was built before you received it. I used this library for a chicken coop build last spring. Searched the keyword, got results organized by size and difficulty, picked the one that fit my backyard. The materials list was exact. Every board matched the actual milled dimensions from the store. The steps were in the right order, including the squaring sequence before the frame went up. The whole build went from first cut to finished coop in one weekend. My neighbor saw it Monday morning and paid me $400 to build him one. That's not a remarkable outcome. That's just what building from a tested plan feels like. I want to address something directly, because it's the most common hesitation I hear from people who've already done their research on this. I've bought plan collections before and never used them. What makes this one different? That's a fair concern. And the honest answer is that most plan collections fail that test because they're organized as file dumps. Thousands of PDFs in folders, no search, no filtering, no way to go from, "I want to build a bookcase," to a specific plan in under 2 minutes. The result is a library you open once, feel overwhelmed by, and never return to. The library I use is fully searchable by keyword, filterable by category and difficulty level, and organized the way a tool should be, so you can type outdoor bench or wall cabinet and get specific results ranked by skill level in seconds. You find the plan, download it, and go. No digging, no overwhelm. Dennis is a retired guy working out of half a one-car garage in Louisiana. He's built a wall-mounted tool cabinet and a step stool from this library. His shop is exactly the kind of setup most people assume isn't good enough for serious woodworking: folding workbench, basic tools, limited floor space. He didn't upgrade his shop. He just used plans that were designed for real-world constraints. Kevin, in Denver, had built exactly one shelf before he used this library to build a bunk bed for his kids. Solid pine. Still standing 8 months later. He followed the plan the way you'd follow a recipe. Step by step. No interpretation required. And the result was something his family uses every day. The reason it works for both of them is the same reason it worked for the chicken coop. When someone has already made the mistakes in their workshop, so you don't have to make them in yours, the gap between where you are and what you want to build closes faster than you'd expect. I want to be honest with you about what happens if nothing changes. 6 months from now, you'll find another plan. It'll look clean and professional, because that's what most plans look like before you try to build from them. You'll buy the lumber, clear the Saturday, get through the first few steps without any problems. And then, somewhere around step 5 or 6, you'll hit the same wall. A measurement that doesn't match. A step that assumes something nobody told you. A materials list that sends you back to the store. You'll finish the project, or you won't. Either way, you'll walk away from it with the same quiet feeling that the result should have been better than it was. And you'll file it away as something you need to get better at, when the real issue was never your skill. The alternative isn't complicated. It's having a plan where that wall doesn't exist, where the measurements were verified against real lumber, the steps are in the right order, and the materials list is exact. Where you can spend your Saturday actually building instead of troubleshooting someone else's oversight. That's not a fantasy version of woodworking. That's just what building from a tested plan feels like. And once you've experienced it, going back to the other kind feels like a choice you're making against yourself. You've already been showing up. You've been buying the lumber, clearing the weekends, putting in the work. The plans just haven't been meeting you at the same level. Every project you've started and struggled through. That's not a record of what you can't do. That's a record of effort running up against a system that wasn't built to support it. The next project doesn't have to go that way. If you want to see the library I use for every build now, the one behind the coop, the bench, and everything else I've mentioned, I left the link in the description. Take a look and decide for yourself. If this video gave you something useful, leave a comment. I'd like to know what project you're working on. And if you know someone who's been stuck on a build they can't seem to finish, share this with them. I'll see you in the next one.